This is Dr. Charles Parker, and you're listening to Core Brain Journal. It's a place where I connect both fresh discoveries and interesting different perspectives from advanced mind science with the realities of real people and everyday life down on Main Street. Well, welcome, folks. Here we are, Dr. Charles Parker, one more time here at Core Brain Journal with Kai Ashley. And Kai is joining us. Welcome, Kai. You tell them where you're joining us from.
Right now I'm in the UK.
Fantastic. She's an Aussie girl, and she spent some time in the U.S., and she's now in the UK, as she just said. She's got an interesting story that, listeners, I think you're going to think is a little bit edgy, to tell you the truth. I mean, I did it when I was reading her bio. It's kind of edgy, but, you know, we won't have a conversation if we don't really look at the details that others wish to contribute. And that's why we asked Kai to come on, because she has a very interesting idea and actually a practice that's called emotional freedom technique. And she's been very lucky. She's been very skilled at it. And she's been, I think, lucky. The lucky came out because she's experienced it, and it's really worked well for her. So Kai is originally from Australia. She's an expert in energy healing practices that powerfully reprogram the subconscious, and it isn't psychoanalysis. She developed a method that instantly releases trauma that has been trapped in the body for lifetimes. Wow, that sounds interesting, because we then get into some deeper thought there. And it changes a person's thoughts and perspectives about themselves. So we're really looking forward to hearing about this. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Kai, before we get started on that particular part of the program?
Okay, I'd love to. So one thing about me is I've always been a massive experimenter of life. I've always experienced things very deeply. And the reason why I'm so gifted in helping people heal, especially some of the most deepest trauma, is because I've been through a lot of it myself. So when people meet me today, they can't even believe that I used to have a lot of emotional issues. I had PTSD, I had social anxiety, I grew up being bullied, no friends, abandoned as a child, abused, like the list goes on and on and on. And I had a lot of issues. So basically, I had to learn how to get over them. And I really believe that a healer is essentially someone that's healed themselves. So just on my journey, I had a lot of chances to heal. And it wasn't until I had a massive nervous breakdown when I was living in San Francisco that I finally woke up and I said, okay, I need to find something. And this was about 6 years ago now. And then I got involved in this amazing healing technique called the emotional freedom technique. And the way that my teacher taught me was on a much sort of like a very deep level. Okay, so some emotional freedom technique, it's all good, but some emotional freedom technique is more surface stuff, whereas this goes right to the very core. And so, yeah, that's where my healing journey really began.
I like that word, core. Goes right down to the core. That's a good thing. So let me ask you a quick question. This is the psychiatric person coming in here a little bit. When you had that crash in San Francisco, was it a depression? Was it anxiety? What actually happened that threw you right down on the ground?
I was living a life that was very unaligned with what was in my best interest. And it was just, it was a mixture of high stress. I was living in the country illegally. I was living quite a wild life. And I wasn't in alignment. So everything came to a head. And the truth is, just to be candid, I actually had this paranoid delusion one night. I just snapped. And it only lasted for the evening, but I actually fell out of a window and almost accidentally died. Like, it was like really traumatic. And that's where I realized I was able to link the fact that happened was a message. It wasn't some random incident. It wasn't because I was broken. It wasn't because I was crazy. It was actually a breakthrough letting me know that my life had to change. And I made a drastic change in my life right after that. And honestly, that breakdown, which, I call a breakthrough, was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it helped me to wake up to myself.
So then, what was that? By the way, I'm getting some feedback on your machine. I think if you turn me down on your machine, that would be great. But back to it. So then what happened were you in the hospital for a period of time? How did you overcome that part of it before you got with your trainer or therapist, whatever?
Okay. Well, as I said, as you said too, my story is quite edgy. I didn't go to a hospital. I did have a doctor who was an allopathic doctor, but she trained in Western medicine. But this is going to sound crazy, but what I did was I went to Burning Man, the big arts festival out in the desert, because I've been there twice before. And you may hear it's a crazy party place, but there's also healing camps in there. And I went there to heal. And I had one special synchronistic experience after another with people that I met who helped me heal, like one after the other. And so about a week in that magical place in the desert, where I was completely sober the whole time and I was just in the healing camps, I had some massive breakthroughs about how I needed to change my life. And then when I got back, I started just looking online for ways to heal. I just knew I was ready. And then I found the emotional freedom technique. It was a 6-week workshop, and we tapped, like emotional freedom technique, you tap on your body, on the acupoints to move the energy through, and you use an advanced type of talk therapy that releases all negative thoughts, pretty much. And so I found that, and I started going to it, and my whole entire life began to change immediately. Like within weeks, the social anxiety that I had that plagued me so deeply, it began to shift in really big ways.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, is that a technique that is so? It's out on the internet, I'm sure, because that's how you found it. But it is a technique that has some history to it. I mean, where did it come from? How was it developed, and who uses it?
Well, it was developed by a man named Gary Craig, and I know there's been some evolutions of it. So it was originally thought field therapy, I believe it was called, but I'm not clear on that. And it's sort of, they found it by accident, I think. So what I really know is that it uses the acupoints on system, and it's been around for about 20 or 30 years now, and it's starting to catch on like wildfire. Like millions of people around the world are starting to use it, and people are having miraculous results. And so it works on the basis that all of our disease comes from an emotional root. And from what I've seen with everything that I've healed myself with, and that I've healed my clients with, every single time you heal and work on the emotional issue, the physical stuff will just heal and release. Their issues will heal and release. The relationships will heal. It's pretty phenomenal.
Well, it's interesting because we've had some other guest interviews that have really gone down the same path. They didn't call it that per se, and I didn't really know what you were about to tell me, or I'd be able to tell our listeners what the episode was. But the interesting thing is the even physical difficulties such as traumatic brain injury and significant PTSD could be changed by this kind of technique. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I used to have PTSD. I used to be really reactive. I had a whole entire childhood of being bullied every day. Like my childhood was a nightmare. And so I was very reactive. I get upset easily. It's to the point that when I was really young, like early 20s, late teens, I would like lock myself in closets and things like that and like scream through them in a fight. Like it's sort of embarrassing type of stuff. I'm not like that anymore. Mm-hmm. But this technique, it really helped to just clear all of that. I just feel more like myself than ever before because I don't have the anxiety. I don't have the triggers that would be set off in a moment's notice. I'm actually quite clear now and it's the sort of thing that people would say that's incurable, but it's not, because I've been there and I've done it.
Well, let's ask you this question. Or I was going to say, tell us, the issue is, do you have to live there for that 6-week period of time? Do you live nearby and come in there for the day and go back to wherever you're staying? Or How does that process actually happen?
Well, for my original training, it was an in-person workshop in San Francisco, and it was just 3 days a week, the Friday, Saturday, and the Sunday, for 6 weeks in a row. So for that particular one, yeah, you definitely had to live in the area or come to the area for those days. But there's so many things online as well that you can do. Is like loads of people are running online workshops. But yeah, it really is best to have one-on-one work with someone that really knows what they're doing.
Well, good. Let's get an example of somebody you've worked with. Take a moment to tell us a transformational experience that you've had with a client of yours, so we can get even a more clear idea of exactly what happens.
Okay. Let's see. Earlier this year, I worked with a lady who had, you could pretty much call her agoraphobia. She was really scared of going outside. She lived purposefully, like in a sort of, like out in the middle of nowhere, outside of town. And every time that she went into town, she'd go into sweats. Like she'd do this weird blinking thing where she couldn't control her blinking. She couldn't talk to people without stammering, and she rarely went outside. She knew herself as someone that was extremely anxious, extremely nervous, and just didn't like social situations. So we've been working together for only 6 weeks, and she went out right after she'd been doing 6 weeks of this work. And the email that she wrote me was hilarious, because she was saying that as she was getting ready to go out, she was expecting for the anxiety and the nervous sweats to kick in, but they didn't. And she's like, what's wrong with me? What's happening? So she forced some food down thinking she wouldn't be able to eat, but she's like, why could I eat that? What's wrong with me? I'm not anxious. And she kept going on and on like that. She got out in the car and she drove down to the restaurant. She was meeting this new friend. And she's like, usually I'd be freaking out by now. I'd be half crying, and I wasn't. She's like, and then I got out in the car park in the dark. I still wasn't nervous. And so what happens is that when people actually release their anxiety in such a quick period of time, I hear this over and over and over again, they're actually shocked and a little weirded out by the fact that it's not there, because they don't know who they are anymore. So essentially, like that hasn't come back. She's still not anxious like that anymore. She's much more confident. She can talk to people. She can go out. That anxiety just is not there. It just doesn't exist in her anymore at all.
So then, did she come to visit you? And if she did, then what was the exact technique? Did you hit the meridians? Do you have a kind of an analysis of what her problems were? How does all that happen?
Let's see. Well, no, this was online in my online membership site. So she mostly just did the recordings that I've done. So I have like a massive EFT and healing library online. And she basically just went through that. She did it hours and hours and hours of it. So probably, as a guess, probably about 20 hours at least. And she just kept going through it. So it's a really simple technique. You just state what's wrong. You just say, okay, here's my problem. I'm anxious, and I'm anxious because, and they fill in the blank why. And then you tap on these meridian points, but rather than trying to release it or let it go, you actually do the exact opposite. So this is the thing that I think everybody needs to know. You don't release your anxiety, you embrace it. You don't release it, you actually pull it in and you embrace it with your heart. It's this, you lean towards it, you take a big deep breath, and as you breathe with your jaw open, it has to be open. When your jaw opens, it will just transmute, like it will just release really quickly, but it doesn't release outwards. It comes in you. It's a really cool technique. You can feel it as you're happening. You don't change the feeling. You change your reaction to the feeling. So you see, the feeling isn't the problem. The anxiety, people are trying to release anxiety. The anxiety's fine. The problem is our reaction to the anxiety. So when we just relax our muscles around it and our body bits, when we relax all of our body around it, it will just pass right through your body.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, that sounds, it sounds like a challenge. It's certainly much quicker than psychotherapy. And the
yeah, it's very quick.
And the person does it on their own. They just think about it, talk about it, and you aren't even there.
Yeah, I guide them every step. I tell them to match my tone of voice. I tell them when to breathe. So for me, I combine breath work with it, which goes hand in hand with the emotional alchemy that you mentioned. Emotional alchemy is, it's a process where you basically straight up turning the low level emotions, so the fear, anxiety, shame, all of that, and you're not releasing it, you're actually turning it into a higher positive vibration emotion, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so when you combine that breath with it and you move towards the feeling and you practice, so one big thing you can do is to trace around the edges of the anxiety. This is like emotional alchemy 101, and this will release anything. If you take a big deep breath, you open your mouth to relax your jaw wide, and then you lean and you just start feeling where does this anxiety begin and end? Where is its edges? Is it bumpy or smooth? Is it soft or round? Is it a triangle or a square or a blob? And as you do that and you breathe and you relax your body towards it, even if it gets worse, which you actually sort of want, because when it expands and it starts to get worse, but you breathe towards it, it will just dissipate and break up and it won't even be in your body anymore.
That is very interesting. I mean, it's provocative to say the very least. And so then what happens? Then the person has this transformational experience, but it does take a while to actually retrain your brain with dealing with the reality of your life.
Well, I don't know, like, there are layers, and yeah, everything's not instant, but some things are pretty instant because what you do at the same time, so that's emotional alchemy, but with EFT tapping or the emotional freedom technique, you also use talk therapy with it. And what this does is it essentially deletes where the negative thought is and it replaces it with the positive thought you want to think. So it's like your subconscious mind is a tape player and it's stuck on repeat on all these negative thoughts that are causing the anxiety, like activating the anxiety in your body. And what we do with the tapping, because you're relaxing towards it and you're sending it love and compassion, it actually dissolves and releases, and then you're replacing it with the thought and the emotion that you want. So the way that I feel when I'm doing it is I feel it's like it lives in certain places in your body, not just your brain, but your whole entire body. Our issues and our thoughts get stored. And so I noticed that when you send like the love to the feeling, essentially, I know that might sound a bit woo-woo, but that is exactly what it is. When you send the love, the acceptance, the compassion, when you relax towards the feeling, it will begin to dissolve, and then the thought behind it will lose its hold, and then you can insert the new thought in. Now, sometimes people, they hold on to the old because they don't know who they'd be without it. So one of the main things that I have to do in the process before we finish is a process around being okay with completely changing their personality, because I have seen people go from, it's like night and day. Sometimes someone will have a complete stress and anxiety about whatever it is, to after just 1 or 2 or 3 of these sessions, everything can be different and they'll look at it differently. Now, the only thing is, reality takes a while to catch up. So the feelings will be instantaneously different, but then over the next few weeks and months, that's when things really start to change.
And they really have to then practice handling their own personal reality.
Well, it sort of flows. I really do suggest that my clients learn how to use selective thinking, which is to monitor their thoughts and have a commitment that when a negative thought comes in, just to find a way to talk with it and to talk to themselves, so that way they can take control of their mind and start training their brain, essentially. But it's a really gentle and natural technique, and it changes you on a cellular level. So it's really pretty instantaneous. They don't get like this whiplash effect. It's not like that. They just feel different. And they start acting different and being different. And some of them don't even see it because it's on such a subconscious level. You change their subconscious programs so that the programs that run in the future are a lot more positive and actually support them with their goals and with the way that they want to go in life. And so it's very natural.
Well, it sounds, as you're talking about it, it sounds so much like the mind-body connection is actually taking place. And it sounds like the applications are there for chronic pain as well. Could you tell us about that?
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. I have used this technique to heal myself from a chronic lung disease. which sounds really fantastical now that I say it. But 5 years ago, I actually almost died from a chronic lung disease. And I was so close to death's door, but I have an aversion to hospitals, funnily enough. And so I refused to go. But at the end, had pneumonia and I had bronchitis, and I'd had it for over 8 months, and I was not looking after myself. Uh, and I almost died. I can't even describe how close to death I was. Like, my face was white. I couldn't breathe. I could hardly talk. I was weak. Like, it was walking pneumonia at its worst. And over 4 hours intensely of this method, where we went backwards and forwards between the grief of my early childhood and the feeling of suffocating in my lungs, which is a very hard thing to tune into. After about 2 hours of this method, it started releasing, and this lung thing that felt like it was like this physical lung thing, it started changing. I'd never experienced anything like this. It started changing where it was no longer a physical lung thing, and it felt like this, like you see a TV static, the snow. I don't know if TVs still have that, but the black and white snow thing on TVs, I felt that in my chest, and it started moving around, started moving up in my throat, back down, up in my throat, back down. And this is all the while where I'm crying and I'm burping and I'm yawning, which is significant because when you release this trapped energy that's been in you since you were a child, it has to go somewhere. Okay, so, it'll come out in tears and laughter and burping and crying and coughing and sneezing. And I was doing a lot of all of that, basically. And yeah, we wrapped up after about 4 hours. I had one little sliver feeling left in the middle of my lungs, but that night I went home and I released the last of it. I could breathe. I was coughing a little bit, but that subsided within a few days, and I have not had lung issues in the 5 years since. And before that, I was sick every single year for months and months on end.
Well, that's very interesting. Did they think that you had an actual pneumonia? Was there an infection? Did you release some phlegm from, what was the physical release? I mean, I heard it sounded like it was a combination of physical and emotional, but I got the doctor in me coming out. You'll have to forgive me, but I know some people in our audience are going to be wondering what the heck actually happened. If she had actual pneumonia and she had an infection, how could that resolve itself so quickly with that technique? And
Yep. I totally get that. It sounds fantastical, but so basically I had been very phlegmy, and it was like a massive problem for me, constantly coughing and coughing stuff up. But after that, I don't really remember, but I feel like most of it turned into energy and release. Like, you should have heard me. I was belching for 4 hours straight. I was yawning, and it may not sound like much, especially to people that are new to this, but it's extremely significant. So I've worked with well over 1,000 people in this technique by now, and every single person, when they have a big release, they'll yawn, they'll burp, they'll cough, they'll cry, and it will release physical issues. It releases trauma, PTSD, all of this sort of stuff, but it's because it's stored in our body. So it's not just stored in one place, it's all throughout our belly, it's everywhere. It gets stored in different places. And as we turn it back into energy, it releases. It's hard to explain. Like, I'm clearly not a doctor, but all I know is from what I've experienced and I've seen time and time and time again. It's something that I think people need to be aware of, that we really are beings made of energy first that are having a physical experience.
Well, it's terribly interesting because I know our audience, you're thinking about back pain, they're thinking about headaches, they got traumatic brain injury. I'm sure a number of people out there have the kind of situation in their mind and their brain that they're just stuck on things, whether it's obsessional thinking or they're stuck somewhere in the past on, as you were saying earlier, on a traumatic event. And a traumatic event is more of a psychological stuckness, if you will. Whereas the things that you were talking about have a certain somatic, painful body aspect to it.
Yeah, well, it turns out that they're actually completely related because as children growing up, and most people on this planet so far are like this, we aren't taught how to process our emotions. We're told things like, boys don't cry, swallow your tears, don't be angry, don't feel that way. And so we don't know how to process our emotions and they get trapped. And they literally stagnate, and that's where the anxiety and the fear starts, and then it will boil down deeper into like the physical issues. Now, I'm glad you mentioned back pain because I actually healed my husband from his back pain that was really bad. Like he had to go off work like for a long time, and eventually I said to him, "Look, let's just do some of this tapping on it," and he acquiesced, and he's like, "Okay." And so he had lower back pain, which sounds crazy, but means that it's related to feeling a lack of support, especially financially. And so we tapped on the pain, felt around the pain, around the edges, like I said. And we also tapped on his feeling of being unsupported, of the stuff that was happening in his life. And we did it over probably several sessions or so. And every time his back pain was diminished, and he doesn't even have it anymore.
That's amazing. Yeah, because there are a lot of people that would definitely appreciate that. Listen, while we're talking, it just occurred to me, I want to ask you about another couple of questions, but for those of you who are interested, we're going to have a complimentary download from Kai. It's going to be at corebrainjournal.com/063 download, and it's called Vibrant Success. It's a PDF, and she's going to provide it for listeners just for your listening in, and you can take it down and think about these matters a little bit further. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that download, Kai? What's in it?
So the download is about, it's reprogramming your mind around money and sales. So my passion in life really is about reaching your dreams, living your purpose, creating success, because I'm all about healing all the blocks in the way. So whether you've had abandonment issues, whether you have physical issues, PTSD, whatever it is that's in the way of you reaching your dreams, that's what I like to help people clear. So this is a really interesting one. This is going to be really unique. You've probably never tried anything like this. This is my type of EFT combined with something I called healing visualization, which is one of the most powerful things I've come across, where it accesses your subconscious mind, like in the very deepest parts, and you're going to change the way you feel and you think on a subconscious level about sales and about money. So this is for you if, yes, you have a business and you want to increase your sales, but it's also for you if you're the type of person where you want to communicate more effectively, where you want to influence people in a positive way more effectively. This will help you to overcome all of that pushback so you feel free and easy about it. And it's really fun too.
Well, you're an excellent example of it, I'll say that.
Thanks.
I mean, I can feel the vibe coming through the doggone Skype. It's amazing. So finally, let's wrap a little bit because we're close to ending here. But let's do maybe one more little example of something you think that we may have missed. It's only a half an hour here, but that would be like, hey, here's another example of something that people might be interested in. And then please tell us a place to go, your website, how we can contact you, ways to move forward with our own individual plans.
Okay. So something that I'd like people to know?
Yeah, start with, do you have is there something we missed? I guess that's the easiest way to ask the question. Is there something you're thinking, hey, I kind of wish we would have talked about that we didn't quite get into it?
The thing that I feel really called to share with the entire world, because I really am, I'm creating a movement out of this. It's a craving for me, for people to know this. So I want to talk to people a little bit about what your emotions actually are. So many people seem to think that their anxiety or their fear is something that you need to let go of and release. They think that it's bad, that it's scary. But I really want to talk to you about a way that you can relate to your emotions differently. So rather than being overpowered by them, you can be sovereign and you can have control over your emotions. Okay, now think of the analogy like this. Rather than thinking that your fear, for instance, is something that you need to push away and kill and push down, it's not that. Okay, so your fear is actually, it's equivalent to a crying child. Because you were hurt when you were young. Okay, this is where all of our issues and our fears and our pains come. They stem from our childhood when it got trapped. So imagine with a crying child, if you were saying, crying child, I'm going to put you outside until you stop crying. You need to go out. Now, ideally, that's not something you do. But that's what we do with our negative emotions. We say, you need to stop. I need to stop feeling this. And so the negative emotion just pushes back, wanting to be loved, because it was that part of you that was hurt so deeply that has never been loved, and you've been rejecting it ever since. So what I want you to see is that this fear that you so want to let go of and release is actually that crying child that just needs you to give it a big, massive hug, even if it's crying and sniffling all over your clothes. So the method is you notice and acknowledge that it's there. You don't try and pretend it's not. You don't positive think over it, and you don't dwell on it. You just acknowledge it and say, yeah, I am actually feeling scared, but it's okay. I'm feeling this fear in my body. And you can, as I said, trace around the edges, use your breath, relax your shoulders, and the feeling will dissolve. And it's because our hearts are a powerful generator. I call it the doorway to the universe. So any low-level emotion that you don't change, but you allow it to come up into your heart as you breathe, it will turn it into a positive emotion, and the anxiety will no longer be there. And this can take a matter of a minute or two if you embrace the feeling like that.
It certainly sounds transformational.
It is.
You know, I've got to figure out what my fears are so I can go out and practice it, you know.
Well, all you can do too is just find a heavy emotion. You just find something that feels heavy or tight.
Well, it sounds like this is going to have some universal appeal. Everybody that's listening to this has this kind of thing. It doesn't matter where they are, whether corporate life, or whether they're in a difficult relationship, or whether they have PTSD, traumatic brain injury. We do a lot of work at Core Brain Journal trying to deal with some of the guys that are coming back. We live in a military town down here in Virginia Beach, and we realize that a number of people come back from these very traumatic events completely lost, and people are throwing meds at them without really having an idea of what all the complexity of the underlying problems are, and it's really counterproductive. And as a result, they feel futile and helpless and really don't know where to go.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a shame to see how people are being cut off by their emotions, and people aren't treating it as the holistic thing that it really is. So this technique, I know that there's a massive movement around the world using EFT for the vets that come back, like the soldiers that come back. That's definitely something to look into for them.
Do you have a specific book that you would recommend in that regard? Your download's going to be interesting. Do you have any kind of an idea of a specific reference?
You know, I don't know one on EFT specifically.
Okay.
But I do know two other books that come to mind that are sort of unrelated, but I do recommend to everyone as a go-to. So these are to really help you realize how powerful you are and how you can heal anything. One is a book called Spontaneous Healing by Andrew Weil, I think, Weil, Spontaneous Healing.
Yep.
And the other one, I don't know the author's name, but it's Meditation as Medicine. And they talk about how you can heal your body from the stories in this are just incredible, what people have healed from. So I would highly recommend to get both those books if you have anything to heal, because it will open your world up to show you what's truly possible.
Well, thank you so much. Now tell us where we didn't quite get your website. Yeah. So let's get that locked in, because you've been so kind to share your personal experience, your ideas. It's very, very stimulating. And really, I know people would love to connect with you. So if you could tell us how to do that, it'd be great.
Yeah, come visit me at the Vibrant Success Club, vibrantsuccess.club for.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah, it's super easy. I'm there. I've actually got loads and loads of free material as well. You could go through my free stuff and it would take you weeks and weeks. And this is even the EFT and the healing stuff too. So if you want to try it out, and just to be frank, my healing stuff is some of the most powerful you'll find, because I just have this intrinsic understanding of it. So come along, try out the free stuff. There's loads there, and it will absolutely help you and change your life.
Well, we're going to be there. Now, I'm going to ask you one other thing. You sound like a person that does training as well. And I could imagine that there are some of our listeners that might be interested in training with you. Do you have
Yes.
do you have something like that available, or how do you approach
I
that?
do. I'm actually getting a waiting list together for the people that want to train with me. I've got quite a few people on the list now that are wanting to learn the way that I do it. So, let's see, I generally just take it down by pen and paper. So just come to my website and send me a message or download the free gift and you can reply to the email there. And, I'll put you on the waiting list. So that'll be coming out soon.
Yeah, folks, if you download that free gift, we're going to share that with Kai. So that's one way to make a connection.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. That was very, very interesting. You have a lot of energy for 9 o'clock over in the UK, but good that you could share it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This has been amazing.
Have a good day, girl.
Thanks for listening to Core Brain Journal. We're working every day behind the scenes to bring you reports that connect research benches with those street trenches. Here we share the complexity of mind science because, as you know, details really do matter. One of the most pervasive, misunderstood challenges is how commonplace medications, like those written for ADHD, are used so regularly without clear guidelines. If you think you'd like more specifics, take a minute to download my 2-page PDF packed with video links and references on the absolute essentials of how to start ADHD medications. They're easily available at corebrainjournal.com/start. Thanks for listening. Do connect and stay tuned. Together we can make a difference.